Coming up on More Than Before.
How important is adventure? I would say to the degree you live life richly is the degree that you invite others to live richly.
This is More Than Before with Nathan Cook.
Hey everyone, welcome back. My guest today is an executive coach, has been for over 30 years. He has a passion for helping men who want to be rock star husbands, fathers, and leaders to their teams. Been married for over 37 years, which is absolutely astounding, especially in the world that we live in. He's passionate, he's kind, he's loving, and he loves to lift people up to enjoy the most in their life. Everyone, you are in for a really special treat today. Carl Gronberg, welcome to the show, my friend. How are you today?
Good question. I'm a man full of gratitude today, Nathan.
I love that.
Quite frankly, I'm living with some eager anticipation also.
Eager anticipation. Tell me a little bit about that.
Just yesterday, I had a woman come up to me. She said, 8 years ago, you said something that changed my life. And I said, really? No idea. I was a greeter at our church, and she has a handicapped son who's in his 40s. And he has a whole ministry, even though he can't speak. So I said, how are you doing? And she said, I'm fine. How are you? And I said, I'm a grateful man. Nathan, she said that changed my life. And she said, it took me about 28 days to learn a new habit. But I started saying, I'm grateful too. And she said, all of the conversations that came out of that from being grateful. And so when you say, tell me more about that, living with gratitude it's just a good practice. Living with eager anticipation is also. 100%. So I like to start out the day and start with some eager anticipation. Then I like to end the day with some deep gratitude. So that might be more than you asked for.
That. No, I love it. I love it because I think that we all could stand to have a little bit more anticipation, eager anticipation, and also gratitude in our lives. And I love that because you live that out, that was able to shine on someone else to help them to do the same exact thing. You know, we are the best foot forward to be able to teach people based off of our actions, not based off of the words that we say. And as coaches, as people who have done training for a number of years, it's really easy to get into the mindset of, well, if I tell people, they're going to do it. And at the end of the day, it's not about telling, it's about doing. Do you walk your walk? Do you live what you actually say? And that's actually one of the things that I really love about you, Carl, is you are a man that is not afraid to admit that he's wrong, to change course, and to improve. You know, I wanted to start by asking you this because, you know, over a decade ago, someone invited me to partner with John Maxwell as a coach. And I knew two things back then. First of all, I did not know what a coach was. And second of all, I didn't know who John Maxwell was. And so you've been doing this for over 30 years now. And I have to ask you, how did you discover coaching? And like, what was your journey to coaching like? And how have you been engaged for over 30 years in being a coach? So how did you discover coaching? What was the journey to kind of get to this place? In the coaching aspect? And then what's kind of kept you engaged for so many years?
In 1980, I met a couple that were a model couple. He was a businessman. He had a lovely wife. I was single at the time. And I remember looking at this couple and I thought, man, that's the kind of marriage that I want. I came from divorced parents. And so I really wanted to get marriage right. And I had this living, breathing example of love and respect and care. It's beautiful. That man, he had a business, and I wanted to own a business. And so everything about him, his spiritual life, was so intriguing to me. He ended up moving to San Diego, and I just called one day out of the blue, hey, how are you doing? And he said, I'm being mentored. You've got to call this guy. And then he said three things that really grabbed me. He said, if I was still a business owner, I'd be a millionaire. The current job that I have, I wouldn't have had if it hadn't been for this mentor. And he said, and people call me a natural at things I know I'm not a natural with. That was so intriguing that I made the phone call. If it was anybody else, I probably would have blown it off. And I'd like to tell you that I was very studious and very inquisitive. Actually, I was quite skeptical. Back then, phones were like this instead of like this.
Yeah.
So I made this skeptical call, and I was polite, but down underneath that was, who are you and what are you about? The only reason I'm talking to you is a person that I respect recommended you. So that's what was really going on in the inside. 40 minutes later, I hung up and I thought, this man is not out for my money. He was genuinely interested in me. That started, I talked to my wife over it, started a year-long coaching process. And Nathan, something happened after a year. My life changed so much that friends said, why don't you do with me what he's doing with you?
Wow.
Now, I was a pretty optimistic guy back then. And show me something back then. It's like, I bet I could do that. With a little help, a little coaching, I bet I could do that. When this friend said, why don't you do with me what Alex Goodman is doing with you? I just said, sorry, I can't. There's no way. I just don't have the wisdom that Alex has. So I told Alex that in our coaching session, and he said, sure you can. He said, first of all, I'll coach you on how to coach him. And he said, and as long as you're 2 weeks ahead of him, he'll think you know everything. So that's what started it. That one person became a coaching client. And then there were 3 more. I was in finance at the time. And so I just reached out to my client base and offered an introductory, call it session. And here I am 30 years later. What makes me do it? Somebody challenged me on this just last week. He goes, what's your deepest motivation? And I said, it's the fist pumping yes. So I hang up from a phone call, and with great exuberance, which I would say 8.5 years, I set myself a record of doing 70 miles an hour on the ski slopes. What was more exciting than the 70 miles an hour was that I was invited by my adult daughter to ski with her every week.
Wow.
But I'll still say 70 miles an hour for me is very exhilarating. and it's the fist pumping yes. So oftentimes I hang up with coaching clients and I'm watching them grow. I'm watching them transform. And that's a fist pumping yes.
Now, you grew up in California, if I'm not mistaken. You actually never left California, it seems like. But so you grew up in Novato, California, which is, 25 miles north of San Francisco. Is that right?
Yeah, right to my door. Right
to your door. I mean, that's pretty amazing. You must have done all the steps so you could calculate that.
Yeah, walked them all, divided by... No.
Well, I'm curious for you, what were family dynamics like when you were a kid? Especially being the middle child. It's funny, there's all these trends going around. You show the 3 children, and the first one is the first child that's, gets all the attention, and then it shoots to the second child, and like halfway through the child's sentence or whatever they're doing, it cuts away to the third child. And so it's kind of this joke almost, but there is a little bit of reality to it that the middle child kind of gets forgotten sometimes. I'm curious, what was life like for you growing up as the middle child?
Nathan, you're asking deep questions. First of all, because I was the first son, it's a little bit different. I was very outgoing. I knew I couldn't measure up to my sister because she was compliant and she did real well in school. She was an A student. I was a BC student. Mm. So growing up, it wasn't until I really looked at those life-defining moments. To me, life-defining moments are things in our past that were very, very positive or very negative, but they impacted our very identity. So if you'd asked me when I was in my young 20s, I would have said I grew up in a pretty average, loving home. And I can name some really great things about my parents. They loved me well, but they were also human and they weren't perfect. So I didn't know that my dad had high standards that I just couldn't meet. So what was life like growing up? Well, it was great and it was horrible.
Mm.
Now, how can I say that? Well, I've got great memories of, riding on my father's back, playing horsey in the hallway, and the belt around his chest, and how fun that was. And the fact that we didn't have a tree house because we didn't have a tree. That didn't stop my dad. So we had a telephone pole house. Now that's pretty cool when you're growing up to have a telephone pole house. And we could climb up there and pull up the rope ladder and nobody could get up there. So there were lots of wonderful things and adventures, 5-week vacations of water skiing, so lots of adventures. I'm very grateful for my father to this day, causing me to look at life as an adventure. Mm. But my parents didn't have a good relationship, and that was really hard. Call it, middle child. I did take it the hardest. So that was tough. And this thing of not measuring up, many times I've now said this, I couldn't paint the fence right, and I couldn't mow the lawn right, and I couldn't sweep the kitchen floor right. And so what I realized, my dad was a master, but he didn't know how to invite me into that. Mm. So at a very young age, I came to believe I was the helper. I didn't get to participate in the creation. Mm. And just to add one other thing, beyond the telephone pole house, etc. My father, when I was 13, he took a hacksaw to a brand new Dodge van, and in 7 years turned it into a spectacular custom motorhome. Spectacular. So much so that 20 years later, he brought it to a motorhome manufacturing plant, and their designers spent an hour and a half taking notes on how unique this motorhome was 20 years after he finished it.
Wow.
So, really cool guy. Now, is it any wonder when you start looking at those things that when I actually passed my father in something, that I became very impassioned? So when I was 12, 13 years old, I became a better water skier than my dad. It was the first thing I could do better than him. Can you understand why I might have been a little addicted to wanting to be the world's best water skier?
Well, you were also nationally ranked, correct, too?
At one time, I was ranked number 3 in my age division, the men 1 division. How that ranked me in the world, because my boss, I was a water ski instructor for the then world champion Mike Siderhout. So I really wanted his spot. I think I'd probably say I was top 50, top 100 in the world, something like that.
Wow.
But definitely had the 3rd overall in the nation.
So what was the transition like then? I think there's kind of this reality in our minds that kind of sets in at one point, because we find something that we're really good at. Like for me, it was martial arts. I was really good at martial arts. I was good at teaching it. I was a good fighter. But there was a moment where I realized that I wasn't the best fighter, and that I wasn't going to be the best fighter. And it was a little bit of a sobering moment for me, but it also allowed me the opportunity to broaden my horizons, to do other things, to try other things. Was there a moment in your life that there was maybe a reality of like, maybe this isn't going to be something that I'm going to attain, and maybe there's something else that I want to start focusing on? Was there a moment in your life that you did that?
The way you describe it sounds much more pleasant than what I experienced. So somewhere after I ranked there 3rd in the nation, and I saw some remarkable things happen during that time, I sensed that there was an amount of ego in this whole thing of pursuing the world's best that seemed unhealthy. Mm. So I remember making the decision I had to let go. Here's the problem, Nathan. I didn't know what to turn to. I didn't. So when you said, let go and turn your eyes to something else, I didn't know what to turn my eyes to. So I became quite lost. And at age 23 was the first time I couldn't stop eating. From the time I let go of that pursuit, I didn't know how to deal with the emptiness. So, by the way, for all the listeners, I don't recommend physical pleasure for emotional pain.
Mm. It usually ends poorly.
Oh my gosh. So I would eat. I often said, if one fistful of food made me full, I had three fistfuls. I would eat till it hurt because the taste would take my mind off of the pain. So that was a tough time. Eventually, and boy, I'm telling you, this was some years, that transition from I'm going to be somebody from my water skiing, which I don't recommend either. You need to be yourself and then see what yourself does. Now, that's probably a deep conversation in itself. So yeah, that was a hard time, a hard transition.
Well, I love that you say there because so many people, like even in their gifts and their talents, they look at other people that are really good who have developed them, and they look at those people and they say, I want to be just like that person, right? If it's a speaker, they say, I want to be, just like a Tony Robbins or a John Maxwell or, Ed Milet, fill in the blank of whatever speaker that is, or ice skating, Tara Lipinski, or you fill in the blank with someone that does really good at a craft that you're good at, and all of a sudden you start to almost long to be that person, long to have that person's life. And it's funny because at a certain point in your life, you realize that you suck at being other people. I think back to King David before he was king, but fighting Goliath, and there's that moment where Saul gives him the clothes. He gives him the armor and he says, hey, take this out to battle. You're going to be great. And David puts it on and it just doesn't fit right. How many of us are putting on clothes, putting on armor, putting on personalities that don't actually match our core of who we were created to be? And when we do that, we're essentially putting faulty software on a false structure. And at the end, it never ends well, because it just doesn't align. It's like putting Microsoft on a Macintosh. It might work for a little bit, but at one point, you might actually have a computer that explodes on you. I'm curious, when was that transition for you, when you started to pursue some things that were more in line with who you were created to be rather than what you thought you wanted to be?
Well, like I say, it was a slow process, and I'm so grateful for my first coach because, my wife married, I was going to say a boy in a man's body, but let's be a little more kind. She married a teenager in a man's body, which is not a gift to any woman, unless you marry in your teens, I guess. The process, I've used the term slow train coming. The coach really started digging me into that. And I'm grateful for those, formative meetings, at church and, meeting with other guys and talking about manhood. That was all, good things along the way. But it really was the coach who invited me into manhood. It's interesting you talk about David and Goliath with something that doesn't fit. I'm quite intrigued with Christ's statement when he said, take my yoke upon you. And you should understand this about my story. My father, I'd mentioned he was quite the adventurer, and Mom complimented that rather well. But he also communicated very clearly that work was more or less a necessary evil. Work is what you had to do, so you got to live the adventure. So Dad was a lot about fun and adventure. And so, again, I welcome that because my life is an adventure. But I had a real bad attitude about work. So that long, slow train also included a redefining of some key words that I think all of us need to really understand how they fit and deal with our life. For example, what is a real man? What is the role of money? What's a woman? What is sex about? And understand, what did I learn about these things? And did I really learn the truth? Do I have any purpose? These are things to really wrestle with. What about death? The last time I checked, Nathan, you could confirm this with me with the data that you have at your hands. Last time I checked, the death rate seems to be hovering right at about 100%.
Yeah.
Is that something you validated?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure every person that I've come in contact with will die at one point.
Yeah. And arguably there's this guy, Jesus. Okay,
Yeah.
So other than that one nuance, it looks like for the rest of the data, the rest of us, death is pretty much a given. So why not wrestle with it? I was terrified of it. I had thousands and thousands of panic attacks around death as I was growing up. What a wonderful thing to outgrow, to deal with. So this idea of putting on something that fits and something that doesn't fit, I didn't want to work. I just wanted to play and have adventures the rest of my life. Also not a gift to a spouse. Not a gift. So what's fun is to see when you really start taking hold of true meanings. I love the fact that there's another place in Scripture that says we are his workmanship. We're created for good works. So going back to the words of Jesus when he said, take my yoke upon you. Well, my attitude about work has so changed that I find myself thinking, a yoke is what you hook, oxen to so they can work. And I find myself thinking about the yoke that we're designed for. And Nathan, when we put that baby on, we start going, yeah, custom fit for me. I can really get some stuff done now. And so whether I'm strapping on a new water ski and go, I'm going to really do something with this, or maybe I happen to have a real affinity for power and speed. I like to sit in a really hot car because I can do something with a really hot car. So much like our own work, when we understand the work that we're designed for, well, now I'm back to the fist pumping yes.
And I love that so much because I think so many people, they're like in a Ferrari. Their life is a Ferrari, but they're treating their Ferrari like a jet ski. It just doesn't work. There are certain things that you are built for. And when you understand those things, your world truly does open up. I love that you brought up your marriage and your wife. Like I said earlier, 37 years, that's nothing to blink at. It's a feat in itself. I think we live in a culture today, a society that has forgotten the importance of working on their marriage, that it takes effort. It's almost assumed nowadays that if you find the right person, there will be no struggles. You won't have difficulties. Everything will just be a nice breeze. And I think that's why divorce rates are so high. We have disillusioned ourselves into thinking that any relationship is easy. In your life, what have been some of the key moments in your marriage that you realized that you needed to put more effort in order to get the marriage that you wanted versus the marriage that you were possibly living in at that moment?
Holy cow. Slow train growing included some spiritual, deep work. So when I met Gina, and who cares that she had a boyfriend with her? I had ideas on how to deal with that. Not that I was interested in being subversive. I remember a friend challenged me on that. And I simply said, look, if God wants them married, amen. I'll support that. But if not, it's just really interesting meeting Gina. And then we really wanted to do it right. I was very cautious because of my parents' divorce. I really wanted to do this right. And ironically, you're interviewing me on the day, 2 days after my son, he's my youngest, just proposed to his girlfriend. And he proposed in French because actually French is her primary language.
Wow.
And so he proposed in French and he texted us back, Her answer was, "We."
I love it.
Now, so I had lofty aspirations for our marriage. And when you talk about defining moments, I'm going to tell you our wedding was a pretty spectacular day, and our first day together, then off to our honeymoon. And it was pretty glorious. And I had great aspirations, after my parents' failure in marriage, that we were going to do it right. Well, there's some certain self-righteousness in there that I don't recommend. I can still remember about 18 months into our marriage, we were at a marriage class that, quite frankly, I thought I should be leading. My confidence level was beyond what it should have been, over the top. So in that group, they said, graph the time that you've known each other, and graph what it was like the day you met and on your wedding. And, they broke it into some different points. So for us, it had only been 18 months. So I did 6-month increments on my graph. And the day I met her and our wedding day was an absolute 10. And then in that 18 months, the honeymoon had worn off a little bit. And so I was down to a solid 9. And I thought, I can't wait to see my wife's, because after all, she was married to me and I was quite proud of myself. Nathan, oh my gosh, put yourself in my skin when I looked over and her scale was just like mine the day we met, a 10. Oops, and then it wasn't like mine anymore, because it quickly dropped down to 2 and flatlined. And I didn't even know it.
Wow.
Because all I knew was, yeah, sure, we had fights, sure, we had arguments, but I kind of liked the kissing and making up part. So for me, the arguments were almost worth it. Not so for my dear bride. I'd like to tell you by the way, I looked over at her graph, and these were the words that came out of my mouth. That's about 35 years ago now. Houston, we've got a problem. I'd like to say that I dealt with it immediately then. What I can say is we stayed at it. And one thing something we brought to our marriage was a high loyalty factor. We meant our vows, but dang it was hard. And we spent thousands of dollars and hours and hours and hours with counselors. And I remember thinking to myself, who cares if I'm a business success, if I'm a marriage failure? Who cares? And so I actually found myself thinking, this is the best investment into my future. Now, if you were a day counter, something like teach us to number our days, I've been married, give or take a few, 13,570 days. That's 37 years plus change. 13,570. And those days had some hard times. And it's been so worth it. We now have grandkids. And I've experienced things that I just never dreamed of. And that is, for example, I have sons-in-law who actually, they enjoy me. We have guys trips together. This upcoming eclipse, we'll be doing that together. I just didn't dream that. My son's girlfriend flew out to spend a few days with us last Thanksgiving just because she wanted to be with us. I would have never imagined that my children's adult significant others would enjoy us that much. So when you say what were some of the waypoints along the way, that I'm just giving you a few of them. Today I'm living with a satisfaction that's up there.
Well, I love that, because there was something in your story that kind of I really resonate with, because there was a certain point in my marriage when I was like, oh yeah, we're doing great, things are fine. We didn't have the scale like the graphs like you guys had, but there was a moment I came back from an event that I was at, and it was just cats and dogs. We were just at each other. I just don't know how we got to that point. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't understand why she's so selfish. Why is she like this? And there was a moment where the mirror was turned on myself, where I realized for the past number of years, since the beginning of our relationship, really, that I was the selfish one, that I was the one who thought I knew everything. And there truly is something to be said about being the learner versus always being the teacher. In fact, last night as I was thinking about our conversation today, I couldn't sleep. I was in bed early and 9 o'clock, and all of a sudden midnight rolls around and I just can't sleep. And I woke up and I walked downstairs and I started to kind of write. And I haven't written in my journal for probably a couple weeks. And so I started to write. And this piece kind of came out of, am I trying to know everything or am I trying to learn everything? There's a very stark difference between the person that shows up and wants to learn and wants to help versus the person who shows up and has everything together and wants to be the light, I guess you could say. That really resonated with me because I think so many people are more focused on looking good and having all the answers than being willing to sit at someone else's feet and say, I don't have the answers, teach me. I think what's really interesting, this kind of adventure piece to your life. You had adventures when you were a kid. You have adventures now as an adult. I saw not too long ago, you had pictures of you snow swimming. I was kind of jealous. And you've had some incredible adventures. I believe in Paraguay. You were going to Paraguay and you stopped off to drive a boat, a ship through the locks of Panama, which is really funny because I think we were probably there around the same time. And at that time, we didn't really know each other. But I'm curious, what is the importance of making your life an adventure? Because so many people today, they wake up, they're going through the grind to their job, they come home and they look at their family as an obligation, and life is not an adventure anymore to them. Life is just a mundane thing that they feel like they have to get through to get to the end of the day, to get to the weekend, to get to the next family vacation or boys trip or whatever it is. How important is it to create adventure consistently within your life rather than trying to wait for the big pinnacle moments of, hiking up Mount Everest or, Machu Picchu or fill in the blank? How important is it in your own life to create adventure versus waiting for adventure to find you?
Nathan, for me, it's crucial. And here's why. When you're a father of young kids, they pretty much do what you say. If they don't, you might
There's a consequence.
give them some sort of discipline. But when children become a teenager, and think about your own teen years, I certainly remember mine, we pretty much have made our decisions. If you're not living the kind of life that people are attracted to, including your own children, they will find reasons to not visit you. Disclaimer, jerk alert. I was way too strict with my kids. And the only reason why my children want to spend time with me is because I finally realized that it was all about me and how I looked, how the Gronberg family looked. I think you'll understand how the Gronberg family looked. Damn it. Not very loving, is it? Very manipulative. So my children suffered with that. The only reason I have a rich relationship with them is I realized what a jerk I was, and they were all very gracious to forgive me. Those were tearful moments, very tearful moments. So when my son-in-law was, by the way, I'm now living in Colorado, Loveland right now. Some friends of mine who said, "Yeah, you can stay at our house." Why would my son-in-law drive 2 hours just to visit us unless he wanted to? So why is my daughter flying out this Friday with her two kids to hang out with us for 10 days? Unless she wanted to. So living the adventure, whatever adventure you create, and it doesn't have to be big. You don't need Everest. I remember just looking out my front door 25 miles north of California thinking, I want to see if I can jog to the top of that mountain. Well, that was my Everest. And can I run nonstop? So when you and I are living an adventure, it gives us the moral authority to say, want to come? Want to join me? Hardly 20 miles from where I'm seated right now, a decade and a half ago, my son and I were hiking up in the headwaters of the Colorado River in the Rocky Mountain National Park. We came across this bridge that went right across the Colorado River, or actually up there it was the Colorado stream. It was springtime, and this was the epitome of snow melt. There was snow all around, melting into that stream, which I'm going to just guess made the stream about 37 degrees, something like that. My son and I were on this adventure together. And when we got on the bridge, we looked down and said, let's go. We jumped in that ice cold water in over our heads and came out, and not to be sexist, but I think you'd understand. We screamed like girls. Something how that water affected us, raised our voices. You know, it was fun. Not only do my son and I laugh at that adventure, but do you know, within a half an hour of jumping into that water, I remember looking up and some people were on the bridge that we had been on, and they said, "Are you crazy?" And I said, "Possibly, but you ought to come try this." So notice the attempted assault on identity. We could go have a whole conversation about that. Notice the playful response that I was able to offer. Within a half hour of our jumping in, we had 25 people sitting on this grassy hill right above the stream, laughing and talking about their unique adventure of jumping in the water. Strangers. And what was really funny is here we are, strangers, and we're telling them the rules of success. Figure that out. We had the audacity to set up a rule and say, it doesn't count unless you go in over your head. So do you know, every single person jumped in over their head. And so notice there was the invitation between my son and I, come on, let's go live this adventure, and how it rippled out to perfect strangers. And I use this term, this question, what is your invitation? You know, I work mostly with business owners and leaders. And I ask, what do people get when you hire them? Most leaders think, well, I'm going to pay you a reasonable wage, and you'll get this time off and these kind of benefits. And my thought is, oh, you have much more to offer your employees than that. So how important is adventure? I would say to the degree you live life richly is the degree that you invite others to live richly.
I love that rule, and I think that rule should be a standard across every area of life. That the rule of your life should be to jump in, so much so that it covers your entire head, that you're consumed with joy and excitement and adventure in your life. And you've mentioned this a couple times, and I want to really hit home on this because I think this is really big. You know, you're talking about the unattainable expectations that your father had for you when you were growing up. And then even fast forwarding to you having your kids, having those same levels of expectations, maybe even higher. As a parent myself, I find myself, because I'm a high performer, I want to push my kids to do their best, to be their best. So I set a very high standard because in my head, I think no one else is going to set a higher standard for my kids than me. No one else is going to understand their ability to achieve and their ability to truly be successful. However, I feel like at times I'm way too strict. I stifle their creativity, their imagination. My wife sometimes looks at me and she says, "Don't rob our children of their joy." And man, that cuts to the core of me. As someone who is a high achiever, and I know that maybe, there were things in the past that, you taste success and you want to have more of that. And so you want to push towards that because there's an identity sometimes that we wrap around success. I'm curious for you, what would you say to parents who have high expectations for their kids and they want to see their kids successful, but they don't want to push their kids away? They don't want to be over strict. What do you say to the parent who has that hard time balancing between reality of having kids, like they are a kid, and also the opportunity to challenge your kids to be better than they're acting currently? How do you balance that?
Great question again, Nathan. How do you do this, man? Keep asking these great questions. When I work with my leaders, I make sure that they all have a signaling device. And I say, this is called the BS flag. And I say, now, when you listen to what I say, if what comes out of my mouth doesn't apply personally, professionally, and relationally, call BS on me. I said, by the way, I get a signaling device also. You're bringing me back to something that my first coach brought into me or introduced me to with my wife. And now I'm going to bring, and I'll connect that to the kids personally, professionally, relationally, or you're going to wave a flag on me. So I remember when my coach was challenging me in my love for Gina and how it would express itself. And he said, why don't you be a student of Gina's growth? And in my sagacious maturity, I responded, well, Gina's not growing. Now, my first coach, he had this rich laugh that if you'd imagine a Santa Claus, ho, ho, ho. He laughed with that kind of laugh, ho, ho, ho. And he said, I suspect she is growing, and you just might not be seeing it. Add a couple decades to that, I remember sitting with my wife and I said, I can name 100 things I love about you. And she said, no, you can't. I said, let's start with 25. And in minutes, I rattled off 25 things. I said, would you like the next 25? And she said, no, I'm good. I'm good. Okay, now let's bring that to the kids. Rather than push, what if we discover? What if we're actually so intrigued with our kids that our daily curiosity is, how has this person been designed? And it's interesting that you mentioned adventure and how big do they have to be. It is such an adventure to discover how your children are designed. It's so awesome. So when you're really intrigued about kids being their best, you have this passion for them and you celebrate those things about them. Recently, I told you that my son is now engaged. Last year, while the men were together on a little adventure, that's when my son said, I'm thinking of joining the Marine Corps. That was a shock. Fast forward, my son is now a Marine. And he's not, and I was hoping he'd go into linguistics. Just for listeners, Marines are the first one into the problem. They're on the front line. If you watch Band of Brothers, they're the ones going in first. I was with a friend yesterday, and his son is a remote air traffic controller. So Marines can go in and create an airstrip in short hours, and he's the one bringing in the aircraft. He's the traffic controller wherever they set up an airport. No. My son is in infantry. If you're going to die fast in the military, infantry is the place to be. Highest odds. Now, obviously, not everyone dies in that. It's just that my son picked something extremely high risk. And I got to say, he's made for it. And when I said, he goes by Carl also. So I said, Carl, why'd you pick infantry? And he said, Dad, these are my men. What am I going to do with that except support my son? Now, has he signed up for an adventure? Dear God Almighty.
I love that you say to study your kids. It's funny because when our kids are born, when you're holding them, if you're not a parent yet, by the way, listening, when you do have kids, if you ever have the privilege of having your own kids, there's a moment when you hold your kids where you go, holy Toledo, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And then you fast forward a number of years. We're only in year 5 right now. My daughter turns 5 here pretty soon. And it's funny because I look at her and I go, I have no idea what I'm doing. But here's the thing. Your kids may not come with an owner's manual, but you have the opportunity to write the owner's manual for them. You have an opportunity to study them, to learn them, to know them, to embolden them to be all that they were created to be, give them confidence, give them steady footsteps to go in the direction where they will be successful. And I love that you talk about this piece of studying how your kids are designed. And I'm not even going to just say kids. I think we all need to study how our kids are designed, how our spouses are designed. We need to study our people that we work with, how they're designed. That's what I love about Carl is so good at studying people and their original design and helping them to live that out.
To that, I'd want to add, there's probably a correlation to the degree that we study ourselves. To the degree we study ourselves is probably the degree we study others. This morning I woke up with a new intrigue. People like to diminish feelings and just do the right thing. Think of David Goggins,
Yeah.
Just do it, so to speak. I don't know him real well, but who cares how you feel? But look at people who have unhealthy habits. And I probably have a PhD in unhealthy habits, an honorary one. And I found myself thinking today, it's feelings are vehicles. And my latest intrigue in understanding my own self is I wonder if I can master negative feelings. Think of I'll just speak for myself. When am I prone to do unhealthy things? When I'm mad, when I'm lonely, when I'm hungry, when I'm tired.
Mm-hmm.
And so why not use those negative emotions to be vehicles that cause you to make healthier choices in times of weakness? Now that takes some intentionality towards our own self. So that's why I just want to bring that up. Once I started thinking about what causes me to grow, it gave me the capacity to be curious about how others grow. I've just seen that correlation over some decades now.
Well, and it's so true. And I love that you hit on that because so many of us are not aware, right? And not only that, but we have we want to be able to lead other people. We want to be able to lead our kids and our spouses. And at the end of the day, if you're not doing the research, the internal research, the looking in the mirror and going, who am I? How are you ever going to take anyone else down that road? And I absolutely love that. Like, you are just a wealth of knowledge, Carl. I love that about you.
It's because I'm an old guy.
No. You're not that old. You just are very chic in your look and appeal.
Yeah, and I have chic gray hair too. Yeah, I've actually added that to look a little more sagacious. Okay, I think that's a lie. That's a lie.
No, there's some truth to that. I do have one more question here for you, but before we do, for all of you listening right now, I want you to go over and check out Carl Gronberg. He has an incredible program called Inside Out. It's a 9-week intensive program to help people in their work-life balance to be better leaders, to be better spouses, to be better parents. And it's absolutely phenomenal. If you want to improve this area of your life, I want you to go check out Carl. You'll find his information in the show notes here. But Carl, we've talked about a lot of different things. And one particular thing that I think I would like to kind of end on is, we are surrounded by leaders, people who have influence, and they struggle with this idea of balance between personal life and the professional life. And I'm curious, what do you say to the person who goes back and forth? Like, they want to show up for work, they want to do their best, but then they also feel like they compromise at home because maybe they're not doing enough at home because they're at work, or vice versa. What do you say to the person who is wrestling with this idea of balance in their life?
To speak to that, I will say, it's again understanding who you are. I call it doing your who. You gave some examples there of David with the armor. I call this the dolphin principle. If you're a dolphin, you ought to be swimming. Maybe you're interested in seeing how quick you could swim from my part of the woods, or old part of the woods, from the Golden Gate Bridge to Hawaii. I wonder how quickly I can do that. If you're a mountain goat, it sucks to try and do what a dolphin does. Mountain goats could be very interested. Right in my backyard here are 57 14,000-foot peaks. It's a mountain goat's paradise. So, like, right now, I keep listening to people talking about, well, I don't want to sacrifice my family time. But think of John Glenn. When he said to his kids the day before he was going to be shot up into space, he said, "Kids, I could die, but I want you to understand, first of all, you're going to be safe with your mom, but this is my purpose, is to advance the knowledge of humankind." So right now, as I work to be who I'm designed to be, and I'm called, I spoke a vow to Gina to love her well. I've been a guest to my hosts here for 5 days. I'll be here 2 more days. It's good for me to have some time alone. They actually left yesterday in the house. They said, "It's all yours, Carl." Well, part of this is for me, but part of it is for Gina, because she's an introvert. She likes time alone. As I've been doing this, a young man, he's not my target audience, but we were working out, and he was going to interview, and I said, "If you'd like, I can give you a couple principles. You don't have to worry about what you say. You have to be more worried about who you are. And if you're grounded in who you are, what you say will be a natural." Well, he got the job. He took me out to coffee, wanted to thank me. And I said, "You're not my client. Clients have to pay me. And clients have to be on the call at 10 a.m. and engage with me for an hour and a half. And I give them my total focus." I said, "You're not a client. You're a friend. You don't have to pay." And then he said something, Nathan. He said, "Well, could I be your client? Can I pay you?" And he threw me for such a loop. I said, my gosh, I've just given you I've just offered everything free. Clients get more of me. I was just so sad. I said, boy, you really threw me. Let me get back to you. So I have a son-in-law who went through my program. He's working 50 to 60 hours a week, and now he works 15 to 20. And he's more productive than ever. And his boss loves what he's doing. And his boss just said, hey, I'm moving out of the company. His boss owns the company. He said, you're doing so good. You just keep running it. I'd like to give you this raise. And I'm leaving. Keep it up. So my son-in-law thought he was going to actually get chastised for working fewer hours. He's just more productive than ever. I'm going to keep tying this back to life balance. His life was changed. My daughter said, Dad, I want to be in your program. And in this particular program, I only work with men. So because of somebody who I had coffee with, next week, I'm going to start a new program for people who aren't business leaders, but want to discover how they're really designed to be. And my daughter is going to be in the program because she wants to be. And she said, Dad, I've experienced Inside Out change my life personally, professionally, and relationally. Mm-hmm. It changed my husband so much. Now, I listened to her say that. I thought, man, I should record this.
Can you repeat that, please?
It's just so funny. And she wants to be in this thing. And we had the most tender conversation about it just 2 days ago. And I just texted her today. I said, hey, we're going to go forward with this program. She goes, great. Now let's plug that into life balance. Life balance is all about priorities. So for one person, they might have to really sacrifice. They might choose to really cut back and work because their family really needs them. Good call. Somebody else might be actually worshiping their family. I made the mistake early in our marriage of putting Gina on a pedestal. She never asked for it, and it's unhealthy. Mm. Love, yes. Worship, no. Yeah. So, and I want to be careful. Pedestals can cause worship. I can't say I worship Gina, but she wanted to come alongside me, not be above me. Mm. So the deeper answer of life balance is really understanding your priorities. Mm. Someone might say, Carl, you're at retirement age. Yeah. And I have friends that I'm in contact with for over 60 years now, friends from kindergarten. And we still get together and compare notes. Some of them are retired. God bless them. But in my life balance right now, this is some of the most exciting work I've ever done. So that, to me, the answer to that question is, do you understand who you are and what you're designed for? And can you use that good mind of yours combined with a caring heart to prioritize life well?
I love it. I love that so much. Carl, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, for giving so much inspiration and motivation for people to truly look at themselves, to see what's possible, to move forward, to have adventure, to be able to understand where you are in life right now and where you could be. I do want to encourage all of you, go check out Carl, follow him, reach out to him if you would like to grow areas of your life. Specifically, if you're a guy and you want to have a rock solid marriage, if you want to have a rock solid relationship with your employees to build them up, if you want to live life with adventure, reach out to Carl, because I know in my heart, I know just by knowing you for a number of years that you are the real deal, my friend. For all of you still listening out there, I want to encourage you, take a moment to like this episode, share it with a friend who really needs to hear what Carl said today. Truly a motivational master, and truly some absolutely amazing takeaways from today's episode. So until next time, remember to be more, see more, and experience more than before.